Have you ever faced a challenge so overwhelming that it seemed impossible to overcome? In the annals of history, few figures embody such sheer dominance and intimidation as Goliath, the legendary giant from the Bible. Today, we'll reveal the untold story of the Nephilim, a tale that changes everything we thought we knew about these ancient beings. This isn't just another retelling of David and Goliath. What we've uncovered is the first documented case of psychological warfare in human history, where a single warrior paralyzed an entire nation's army. But here's what makes this story extraordinary. Goliath wasn't merely a tall human warrior. He was part of an ancient lineage that traces back to supernatural beings. Through extensive research of ancient Hebrew texts, Dead Sea Scrolls, and archaeological findings, we've pieced together a story more fascinating than anything previously told. What emerges is a narrative that challenges our understanding of both history and faith. By the end of this journey, you'll discover the truth about the biblical giants, understand their profound impact on human history, and most importantly, learn timeless lessons about facing seemingly impossible odds in your own life. Join us as we unravel one of history's most misunderstood stories, where courage confronts fear, faith challenges power, and an unlikely hero changes the course of history forever. Part 1. Origins of the Giants. In the shadowed mists of prehistory, long before the great civilizations we know today, the world was a vastly different place. The air itself seemed charged with possibility and danger, for this was an age when the boundaries between the divine and mortal realms were not yet firmly set. As humanity spread across the fertile lands of the ancient earth, an extraordinary and forbidden drama was about to unfold, one that would forever change the course of human history. Picture, if you will, the world in those primordial days. Cities were beginning to rise from the wilderness, their mud brick walls reaching toward heaven. In these settlements, human civilization was taking its first tentative steps. But among the ordinary people walking these early streets, something extraordinary began to occur. The ancient text of Genesis 6:1-2 pulls back the veil on this mysterious time. When human beings began to increase in number on the earth, and daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw that the daughters of humans were beautiful, and they married any of them they chose. These sons of God, the Beni Elohim in ancient Hebrew, were no ordinary beings. Ancient texts describe them as radiant creatures of light, celestial beings whose very presence inspired awe and wonder. They were watchers sent to observe humanity, but something unprecedented happened. As they gazed down from their celestial realm, they became enchanted by human women, their divine detachment crumbling before the power of desire. The ancient Book of Enoch, though not included in the canonical Bible, provides a haunting account of their descent. Led by powerful angels like Samiaza and Azazel, 200 of these divine beings descended upon Mount Hermon, bound by a terrible oath to fulfill their forbidden desires. Their arrival on earth was marked by signs and wonders, lights in the sky, trembling in the earth, and a sense of impending change that filled the hearts of all who witnessed it. The unions that followed were unlike anything creation had seen before. When divine and mortal merged, the offspring were beings of terrible power and beauty, the Nephilim. Genesis 6:4 describes them as the mighty men who were of old, the men of renown. But this barely captures their true nature. They were giants in every sense, not just in physical stature, but in presence and power. Ancient texts speak of beings that could shake the earth with their footsteps, whose voices could command the elements, and whose knowledge encompassed secrets never meant for mortal minds. As these hybrid beings grew and multiplied, they began to reshape the world around them. The Book of Enoch tells us that their celestial fathers taught them forbidden arts. Azazel revealed the secrets of metalworking and warfare, while others taught astrology, cosmetics, sorcery, and the bitter roots of herbs. This knowledge, but with great power came great corruption. The Nephilim's appetites were as enormous as their stature, Ancient texts describe how they consumed everything in their path, and when normal food became scarce, they turned to horrifying alternatives. The Book of Enoch paints a disturbing picture of these beings terrorizing humans, consuming their crops, their livestock, and eventually turning against humanity itself. The world descended into chaos under their reign. Violence became the language of power, and wickedness spread like a poison through human society. Genesis 6:05 captures the depth of this corruption. The Lord saw how great the wickedness of the human race had become on the earth, and that every inclination of the thoughts of the human heart was only evil all the time. The Nephilim's influence had led humanity so far from its divine purpose that the very thoughts of human hearts had become corrupted. The situation became so dire that it prompted an unprecedented response from the Creator. The Great Flood was not merely a natural disaster. It was a divine intervention designed to cleanse the earth of the corruption brought by the Nephilim and their influence. As the waters rose, covering even the highest mountains, it seemed the age of giants had come to an end. Yet here's where the story takes an unexpected turn. Hidden within Genesis 6:04 is a phrase that has puzzled scholars for millennia. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days and also afterward. Despite the flood's cleansing waters, the bloodline of the giants somehow survived. Some ancient sources suggest that the wives of Noah's sons carried these genes, dormant but deadly. Others propose that certain fallen angels, undeterred by the flood's warning, once again crossed the divine boundary, though on a smaller scale. Whatever the means, the giants would return to walk the earth again, their presence felt in the time of Moses and beyond. When the Israelites first approached the Promised Land, their scouts encountered the Anakim, descendants of the Nephilim. Numbers 13:33 captures their terror. We saw the Nephilim there. We seemed like grasshoppers in our own eyes, and we looked the same to them. These post-flood giants established strongholds throughout Canaan, including the city of Gath, which would later produce the most famous giant of all, Goliath. As we turn our attention to Goliath, remember that we're not just looking at a fearsome warrior, but at the heir to an ancient and terrible legacy. A legacy that was about to face its greatest challenge from the most unexpected source. For in the valley of Elah, where a shepherd boy would confront a giant, the ancient struggle between divine purpose and corrupted power would reach its most dramatic turning point. Part 2. The Living Fortress, Goliath's 40 Days of Terror. As dawn broke over the valley of Elah, the morning mist still clinging to the ground, an eerie silence fell across the Israelite camp. The only sound was the distant clink of armor and the nervous shuffling of soldiers adjusting their positions. They knew what was coming. Every morning for 40 days, it had been the same. The approach of a figure so terrifying that hardened warriors trembled at his mere presence. Through the thinning fog he emerged, Goliath of Gath, standing over 9 feet tall, his massive frame silhouetted against the rising sun. This wasn't just any warrior, this was a living fortress. A being whose very presence sent shockwaves of primal fear through the ranks. Ancient records describe him in almost mythological terms, yet the biblical account provides chillingly specific details about his appearance and armament. His bronze helmet gleamed like fire in the morning light, its weight alone exceeding what most men could lift. The coat of mail he wore was a masterpiece of Philistine metallurgy, thousands of interlocking bronze scales creating an impenetrable defense. At 125 pounds, it weighed more than the combined weight of 2 modern soldiers' full combat gear. The shaft of his spear, thick as a weaver's beam, would have been too massive for a normal man's hand to fully grasp. Its iron head alone weighed 15 pounds, a devastating weapon that could impale multiple warriors with a single thrust. But what made Goliath truly terrifying wasn't just his physical presence. Ancient Jewish texts suggest a darker, more mysterious origin. As a descendant of the Nephilim, the mysterious giants mentioned in Genesis 6, he carried the blood of an ancient and forbidden lineage. These weren't just tall humans, they were the offspring of divine beings who had rebelled against heaven's order. Each step Goliath took on the battlefield was a reminder of an age when giants walked the earth and challenged divine authority itself. The psychological warfare began as it always did. Goliath's voice, deep as thunder, rolled across the valley. "Why do you come out and line up for battle? Am I not a Philistine, and are you not the servants of Saul? Choose a man and have him come down to me." The words were carefully chosen, each syllable designed to maximize terror and humiliation. "If he is able to fight and kill me, we will become your subjects. But if I overcome him and kill him, you will become our subjects and serve us." The impact was devastating. The Bible records that, on hearing the Philistines' words, Saul and all the Israelites were dismayed and terrified. This wasn't just fear, it was a calculated campaign of demoralization. Seasoned warriors, men who had faced death in countless battles, found themselves paralyzed. Even King Saul, who stood head and shoulders above other Israelites and should have been the natural champion to face Goliath, remained frozen in indecision. The historical context made this challenge even more potent. The Philistines had recently demonstrated their military might by capturing the Ark of the Covenant, though they had been forced to return it due to mysterious plagues that followed. Now, through Goliath, they were asserting their dominance again. Each morning and evening, for 40 days, this living fortress would stride into the valley, his shield-bearer before him, presenting himself not just as a warrior, but as an embodiment of inevitable doom. This wasn't merely a military challenge, it was a theological one. In ancient Near Eastern warfare, battles were seen as contests between deities as much as between armies. When Goliath roared, "This day I defy the armies of Israel," he was effectively claiming the superiority of the Philistine gods over Yahweh himself. His massive weapons and supernatural lineage were presented as proof of divine favor, a direct challenge to Israel's faith. As each day passed, the psychological toll mounted. The once proud army of Israel, the force that had conquered Canaan under Joshua, found itself reduced to a trembling mass of uncertainty. Every sunrise brought fresh dread, every sunset another day of national humiliation. The valley that had once echoed with war cries now resonated only with Goliath's taunts and the whispered prayers of desperate men. In their tents at night, veteran warriors who had faced death countless times found themselves unable to sleep, haunted by the giant's words. Young soldiers, eager for glory when they'd joined the army, now questioned everything they'd believed about courage and faith. The very foundations of their identity as God's chosen people seemed to be crumbling. But as the 40th day dawned, and Goliath's challenge seemed more insurmountable than ever, no one in either army could have predicted that their deliverance would come from the most unlikely source. A young shepherd boy was about to arrive at the camp, one who would see what everyone else had missed, that this wasn't just a battle between warriors, but a test of faith that would echo through the ages. The stage was set for one of history's most remarkable confrontations, where courage would face down impossible odds, and where faith would challenge the very boundaries of what seemed possible. Part 3. David's Journey to the Battlefield. Amid the swirling dust and tension of Israel's military camp, an unexpected figure emerged through the morning haze, a young shepherd boy named David. The scene was a stark contrast of chaos and calm, battle-hardened warriors huddled in their tents, while this unassuming youth, barely 15, walked confidently through the camp, carrying simple provisions for his brothers. The morning sun glinted off shields and spears, casting long shadows across the valley where fear had reigned for 40 days. David's presence in this theater of war began in the tranquil hills of Bethlehem, where he spent his days in solitude tending his father's sheep. These peaceful pastures had shaped him in ways no one could have predicted. While other young men trained for war, David had developed different skills, protecting his flock from predators, perfecting his aim with a sling, and most importantly, cultivating an unshakable faith in God through hours of meditation and prayer. The Psalms he composed while watching his sheep would later reveal the depth of this intimate relationship with the divine. Jesse, David's aging father, had sent him on what seemed a routine errand. "Take these 10 loaves of bread and these 10 cheeses to the commander of their unit," Jesse instructed. His weathered face creased with concern for his older sons fighting in Saul's army. The biblical account in 1 Samuel 17 notes how Jesse's older sons, Eliab, Abinadab, and Shammah, had been serving in Saul's army for months, facing this unprecedented standoff with the Philistines. As David approached the military camp, the atmosphere shifted dramatically from the peaceful fields he knew. The air was thick with fear and the acrid smell of too many men confined too close together. The once proud army of Israel, warriors who had conquered nations under Saul's leadership, now moved like shadows between tents, their eyes downcast, their shoulders hunched under the weight of shame. The sound of Goliath's daily taunts had become a terrifying ritual, each word echoing off the valley walls like thunder. The young shepherd's first glimpse of Goliath was a moment that would be forever etched in history. The Philistine champion emerged from his lines like a living mountain, his bronze armor gleaming in the morning sun. The biblical description is precise: 9 feet and 9 inches tall, wearing scale armor, weighing 125 pounds. The sight had reduced hardened warriors to trembling, but in David's eyes flashed something different: righteous indignation. "Who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God?" David's voice, though young, carried across the camp with surprising authority. The soldiers nearby turned in shock, some scoffing, others watching with curious interest. Here was someone who saw not just a giant, but an affront to divine honor. The Hebrew text captures the nuance of David's words. He wasn't just asking about Goliath's identity, but questioning his right to stand against God's chosen people. The commotion drew David's eldest brother Eliab, who had been watching from nearby. The biblical narrative reveals the complex family dynamics at play. Eliab, who had been passed over when Samuel anointed David, now faced his youngest brother's courage as a mirror to his own fear. "Why have you come down here?" he demanded, his voice thick with shame and anger. "And with whom did you leave those few sheep in the wilderness? I know your pride and the wickedness of your heart." The accusation carried the weight of years of family tension and the fresh sting of personal cowardice. David's response was characteristically measured. "What have I done now? Is there not a cause?" These words, simple yet profound, spread through the camp like wildfire, eventually reaching the royal tent where King Saul sat brooding. The contrast between Israel's 2 anointed leaders could not have been more striking. Saul, the tall, imposing figure chosen for his physical stature, now hiding in his tent, while David, the overlooked shepherd, stood ready to face the giant. How they had to search for truths in the depths of the psalm. The scene in Saul's tent was charged with tension as David was brought before the king. The young shepherd's words cut through the heavy atmosphere of defeat. "Let no one lose heart on account of this Philistine. Your servant will go and fight him." The assembled officers exchanged glances of disbelief, but David continued, recounting his battles with lions and bears while protecting his flock. His voice carried not youthful bravado, but the quiet confidence of one who had experienced God's faithfulness firsthand. "The Lord who rescued me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will rescue me from the hand of this Philistine," David declared, his eyes shining with conviction. The biblical account suggests that something in David's bearing, perhaps the same divine presence that had led Samuel to anoint him, touched Saul's heart. In a moment that would alter the course of history, the king of Israel looked at the shepherd boy before him and said, "Go, and may the Lord be with you." As David prepared to face Goliath, the real test of his faith was about to begin. The young shepherd's unconventional approach to battle would not only challenge military wisdom, but demonstrate that true strength often comes in unexpected forms. What happened next would become more than just a victory. It would become a testament to the power of faith over fear and the triumph of divine purpose over human impossibility. Part 4. The battle that changed everything. The sun blazed mercilessly over the valley of Elah, casting long shadows across the battlefield where two armies faced each other in a tense standoff. The atmosphere in King Saul's command tent was thick with anxiety, the heavy canvas walls barely muffling the sounds of an army gripped by fear. The nervous clink of armor, whispered prayers, and the distant, thunderous taunts of their tormentor echoing across the valley. Before the king stood an unlikely figure, David, a shepherd boy whose sun-bronzed face and calloused hands spoke of days spent in the wilderness rather than the battlefield. Despite his youth, there was something in his bearing that commanded attention. His eyes blazed with an intensity that made even the battle-hardened guards shift uncomfortably. "Let no one lose heart on account of this Philistine," David's clear voice cut through the tension like a blade. "Your servant will go and fight him." The declaration hung in the air, seeming almost absurd given the circumstances. For 40 grueling days, Goliath had systematically destroyed the morale of Israel's mightiest warriors. Each morning and evening, his challenges had grown more bitter, more blasphemous, until the very mention of his name sent shivers through the ranks. King Saul, himself a towering figure who stood head and shoulders above most men, studied the young shepherd with a mixture of desperation and disbelief. The king's once proud shoulders now bore the weight of his army's fear and shame. "You cannot go against this Philistine to fight him," he protested, his voice heavy with the wisdom of years of warfare. "You are only a youth, while he has been a warrior from his youth. This is not a matter of courage alone. This is death itself you're walking toward." But David's response would alter the course of history. His voice took on a depth that seemed to transcend his years as he recounted his experiences in the wilderness. "Your servant has been keeping his father's sheep," he began, painting a vivid picture of solitary battles fought far from human eyes. "When a lion or bear came and carried off a sheep from the flock, I went after it with nothing but my trust in God. I struck it and rescued the sheep from its mouth. When it turned on me, I seized it by its hair, struck it, and killed it." The tent fell silent as David continued, his words carrying not just confidence, but a profound understanding of divine protection that had been forged in those lonely battles. "The Lord who rescued me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will rescue me from the hand of this Philistine." His faith was not blind optimism, but was rooted in personal experience of God's faithfulness. Saul, perhaps seeing a glimmer of hope in the darkness that had engulfed his army, made one last attempt at conventional warfare. He offered David his own royal armor, a symbol of earthly power and traditional military might. The scene that followed was almost comical, attendants struggling to fit the king's massive bronze breastplate onto David's smaller frame, the helmet sitting awkwardly on his head, the sword too heavy at his side. Yet when David tried to walk, the weight of the armor made his movements clumsy and restricted. With quiet certainty, he removed each piece, laying them respectfully aside. "I cannot go in these," he declared. "I am not used to them." Instead, the shepherd-turned-warrior knelt by a nearby stream, selecting 5 smooth stones with the practiced eye of one who knew that in his calling, precision mattered more than power. The contrast when David approached the battlefield was startling. Goliath, the giant of Gath, rose like a living fortress, nearly 10 feet of rippling muscle and gleaming bronze armor. His armor alone weighed more than many men, the bronze scales catching the sun like dragon's hide. His spear shaft was thick as a weaver's beam, its iron point alone weighing 15 pounds. The giant's shield-bearer walked before him, a detail that emphasized both his status and the sheer scale of his military presence. When Goliath caught sight of David, his laughter rolled across the valley like thunder. "Am I a dog?" he roared, his voice dripping with contempt, "that you come at me with sticks?" He cursed David by his gods, each blasphemous word designed to shatter the boy's resolve. Come here, and I will give your flesh to the birds of the air and the beasts of the field." The Philistines' words were calculated, part of the psychological warfare that had already broken so many warriors. But David's response revealed the true nature of this confrontation. His voice, clear and unwavering, carried across the battlefield. "You come against me with sword and spear and javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This day the Lord will hand you over to me, and I'll strike you down and cut off your head. Then all the world will know that there is a God in Israel." What followed happened with devastating swiftness. As Goliath began his advance, each step shaking the ground, David ran quickly toward the battle line. The young shepherd's movements were fluid, practiced, the motion of someone who had spent countless hours perfecting his craft. In one smooth movement he reached into his bag and loaded his sling. The stone whirled through the air with a sound like a whisper of destiny. The projectile struck Goliath in the forehead with terrible accuracy, the one vulnerable spot in his armor. The giant's expression froze in a mask of surprise as the stone sank deep into his skull. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. Then, like a mighty cedar falling, Goliath crashed face first into the dust of the valley. The silence that followed was deafening. David, moving with deliberate purpose, approached the fallen giant. Using Goliath's own massive sword, a weapon that symbolized everything the Philistine had trusted in, David severed the giant's head. Lifting it high, he turned to face both armies, a living testament to the power of faith over fear. The effect was electric. The Philistine army, seeing their invincible champion lifeless in the dust, broke in panic. The Israelites, their faith suddenly reignited, raised a battle cry that shook the hills. The same warriors who had cowered in their tents now pursued their enemies with renewed courage, driving them back to the gates of Gath and Ekron. As the dust settled on this extraordinary battle, the story was far from over. The echo of David's victory would soon draw out Goliath's brothers, giants who carried not only their brother's strength, but also a burning desire for revenge. The stage was set for more confrontations that would test Israel's faith and courage in ways they could not yet imagine. Part 5. The Brothers of Goliath. The death of Goliath was a pivotal moment for Israel, but it wasn't the end of the giants who haunted their land. While Goliath's defeat had shattered the Philistine army's confidence, it also marked the beginning of new challenges. For within the city of Gath, Goliath's brothers, formidable warriors who carried the same legendary bloodline. Despite struggles, they had lived out their choices, always discerning self-interest over instinct and displacement of their own. The Bible records several encounters with these giants, each carrying its own drama and significance. Among them was Ishbi-Benob, whose very name struck terror into the hearts of Israel's warriors. Armed with a spear weighing 300 shekels of bronze, about 7.5 pounds, and carrying a new sword, he represented a threat perhaps even more dangerous than Goliath himself. His opportunity came during a battle where David, now older and wearied from years of warfare, found himself vulnerable on the battlefield. As the clash of weapons filled the air and dust clouded the vision of the warriors, Ishbi-Benob spotted his chance. David, the slayer of his brother Goliath, was within his reach. The giant's heavy footsteps thundered across the battlefield as he bore down on the aging king, his massive spear raised for a killing blow. In this moment of crisis, it seemed the story of David might come to a tragic end. But just as Ishbi-Benob was about to strike, help arrived in the form of Abishai, one of David's mighty men and his loyal nephew. With the same courage that had once driven David to face Goliath, Abishai intervened. The clash between Abishai and Ishbi-Benob was fierce, but in the end the giant fell, just as his brother had before him. This near-death experience led David's men to make a solemn vow: "You shall no longer go out with us to battle, lest you quench the lamp of Israel." Their words acknowledged both David's vital importance to the nation and the continuing threat posed by these formidable enemies. But the brothers of Goliath weren't finished. Another giant named Saph rose to challenge Israel, wielding weapons that seemed crafted for creatures rather than men. Yet he too fell to one of David's warriors, adding another chapter to the ongoing saga of conflict between Israel and these remnants of the ancient Nephilim. Perhaps most intriguing was the unnamed warrior with 6 fingers on each hand and 6 toes on each foot, a physical anomaly that marked him as truly otherworldly. This giant, whose very appearance testified to his supernatural lineage, met his end at the hands of Jonathan, David's nephew. The biblical text specifically mentions these physical characteristics, suggesting their significance in connecting these warriors to their ancient, non-human ancestry. Lami, another brother of Goliath, carried a spear with a shaft like a weaver's beam, the same description given to Goliath's weapon. This detail wasn't merely coincidental. It marked these warriors as part of the same fearsome lineage. Lami's defeat at the hands of Elhanan added to the growing list of giants who fell before Israel. Each of these victories served as more than mere military successes. They were spiritual declarations. These giants represented not just physical challenges, but the lingering shadows of ancient rebellion against divine order. Their defeat, time and again, reaffirmed Israel's reliance on God and the truth of David's original proclamation, "The battle is the Lord's." For the Philistines, the deaths of Goliath's brothers marked the unraveling of their dominance. The mighty warriors they had relied upon as symbols of strength and invincibility were falling, one by one, to the hands of men empowered by faith. Each defeat chipped away at the aura of invincibility that had once surrounded these descendants of the Nephilim. As the tales of these victories spread throughout the land, they became more than just stories of battle prowess. They served as powerful reminders that even the mightiest opponents could fall when faced with unwavering faith. But these encounters would raise even deeper questions about the nature of these giants and their connection to the mysterious Nephilim of ancient times. Part 6. The Spiritual Significance and Legacy of David's Victory. In the aftermath of David's triumph over Goliath, a profound transformation swept through Israel that would echo through generations. Picture the scene, the Valley of Elah, where just moments before, a shepherd boy had faced down a giant. The air still rang with the impact of that single stone, but something far more significant than a military victory had occurred. This wasn't merely the fall of a warrior. It was the moment that redefined what it meant to trust in divine power. To understand the depth of this transformation, we must first grasp the spiritual crisis that had gripped Israel. For 40 days, Goliath's taunts had done more than challenge their army. They had shaken the very foundation of their faith. Each morning, as the giant's voice boomed across the valley, he wasn't just mocking their military might. He was attacking their identity as God's chosen people. In other words, they controlled the power system they were marginally honored to rule. And where is your God now? His presence seemed to ask. The Israelites, who had witnessed the parting of the Red Sea and received manna from heaven, found themselves paralyzed by fear. This crisis mirrored a pattern seen throughout biblical history. Just as the Israelites had once feared the giants in Canaan during the days of Moses, causing them to doubt God's promises, now they faced a similar test. Numbers 13:33 records how the spies had reported, "We saw the Nephilim there. We seemed like grasshoppers in our own eyes." This same spirit of fear had resurfaced, threatening to define their national character. But David's victory changed everything. His words before the battle, "You come against me with sword and spear and javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty," became more than a battle cry. They became a template for facing impossible odds with supernatural confidence. The victory demonstrated that faith wasn't just a spiritual concept, it was a practice. The impact rippled through Israeli society. Consider how the same army that had cowered in fear now charged forward with renewed courage. The text tells us they pursued the Philistines all the way to Gath and Ekron. This wasn't just a military pursuit, it was a nation rediscovering its identity and purpose. Each step of that chase was a step away from fear and toward faith. This transformation extended beyond the battlefield. David's victory became woven into the fabric of Jewish spiritual consciousness. The Psalms would later echo with references to this moment, reminding future generations that the battle belongs to the Lord. Psalm 118, 6-7. The story became a cornerstone of Jewish identity, teaching that true strength lies not in physical might, but in unwavering trust in God. But perhaps the most profound legacy is how this story bridges the physical and spiritual realms. David's victory over Goliath foreshadowed greater spiritual truths. Just as David faced down a seemingly invincible foe with nothing but faith and simple tools, so would future generations learn to confront their own giants, whether they be fear, doubt, or overwhelming odds. As we reflect on this ancient victory, we find its echoes in our modern struggles. The giants we face today may not wear bronze armor or carry spears, but they are no less intimidating. What lessons can we draw from this timeless story to face our own challenges? The story of David and Goliath resonates through the ages not merely as a tale of triumph, but as a profound lesson in faith, courage, and the power of divine purpose. As we conclude our exploration of the Nephilim and their legacy, let's delve deeper into the timeless wisdom this ancient narrative offers to modern hearts. Picture the Valley of Elah, where the morning sun cast long shadows across the battlefield. For 40 days the air had been thick with fear and the thunderous taunts of Goliath. The Israelite army, though mighty in number, stood paralyzed before this living fortress of bronze and defiance. Every warrior among them had been trained for battle, yet none dared to step forward. This wasn't merely physical intimidation, it was a spiritual crisis that struck at the very heart of their identity as God's chosen people. Into this arena of fear stepped David, a shepherd boy whose heart beat with an unwavering faith. His approach to battle defied all military logic, refusing the king's armor, choosing 5 smooth stones over proven weapons of war. To the watching armies, it must have seemed like madness, yet David understood something profound that his contemporaries had forgotten. The battle was not about physical might, but about divine purpose. Consider the deeper symbolism at play. Goliath, descended from the Nephilim, represented more than just Philistine military might. He embodied the ancient corruption that had once caused God to flood the earth, the pride of beings who thought themselves equal to divine power. His very existence was a challenge to God's established order. David, in contrast, carried no special lineage, no supernatural heritage. He was simply a faithful servant who understood that true strength flows from trust in the divine. The moment of confrontation carries echoes of another ancient battle, the first rebellion in heaven, when pride faced divine authority. Just as Goliath fell to a simple stone, so too did the mighty Nephilim fall before the flood. The pattern repeats throughout biblical history. Human pride and supernatural defiance ultimately bow before. But the story doesn't end with Goliath's fall. David would go on to face the giant's brothers, each encounter reinforcing the lesson that faith overcomes fear. When David became king, he faced challenges that dwarfed even Goliath: betrayal, warfare, and personal failure. Yet the lesson learned in the valley remained. Victory belongs to those who trust in God's power, rather than their own. This narrative speaks powerfully to our modern context. Today's giants may not wear bronze armor or carry spears, but they loom just as large. Chronic illness, financial crisis, broken relationships, systemic injustice. The pattern of victory remains the same. It's not about our strength, but about our trust in divine power. As we close our journey through this ancient tale, let us remember that every generation faces its own giants. The weapons of our warfare may have changed, but the source of our victory remains constant. Like David, we're called not to cower before our challenges, but to face them with faith that sees beyond physical reality to spirit. The legacy of David's victory reminds us that what appears impossible through human eyes becomes possible through divine perspective. Whether facing personal struggles or societal challenges, we carry the same promise that empowered a shepherd boy to change history. The battle belongs to the Lord. Just as the Nephilim's defeat marked the triumph of divine order over chaos, every victory over modern giants declares that same truth. These ancient stories aren't merely historical accounts. They're blueprints for facing our own impossible odds with unshakable faith. As we reflect on these timeless lessons, let us remember that we too are part of this continuing story of faith overcoming fear, of divine purpose prevailing over earthly power. The giants before us may seem insurmountable, but like David, we stand not in our own strength, but in the power of the living God. As we conclude our journey through this remarkable tale of giants, faith, and divine purpose, let's reflect on the profound lessons that echo through time. The story of David, Goliath, and the Nephilim isn't just an ancient narrative. It's a powerful reminder that the greatest battles aren't won by physical might, but through unwavering faith and divine purpose. Remember how David faced Goliath not with the king's armor but with simple stones and unshakable trust. In our own lives, we too face giants that seem insurmountable. Perhaps yours is fear, doubt, or circumstances that appear beyond your control. But like David, your victory doesn't depend on your strength alone. It rests in knowing whose battle you're fighting. Think about it. What giants are you facing today? What seemingly impossible challenges stand before you? The same God who empowered David to overcome Goliath stands ready to fight your battles too. Your giant may not wear bronze armor or carry a spear, but the principle remains the same. When faith confronts fear and divine purpose meets human impossibility, mountains move. This story challenges us to see our struggles through different eyes. Just as David saw beyond Goliath's intimidating stature to recognize a spiritual battle, we too must look beyond our surface challenges to understand the deeper victories God wants to win through us. What looks like defeat in the natural realm can become the platform for. I invite you to share your thoughts in the comments below. What giants are you facing? How has this story changed your perspective on dealing with seemingly impossible challenges? Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear to find their courage. If this journey through ancient mysteries and timeless truths has touched your heart, don't keep it to yourself. Share this video with someone who needs encouragement to face their own giants. Hit that like button if you've found strength in this message, and subscribe to join us as we continue exploring more powerful stories from the Bible that can transform your life. Remember, each one of us has a unique battle to fight, but none of us fights alone. Your giants may be tall, but your God is taller. Your challenges may be great, but your faith can be greater. The battle belongs to the Lord, and victory awaits those who dare to believe. Thank you for joining us on this incredible journey. Until next time, may you face your giants with courage, knowing that the same power that brought down Goliath lives in you today. God bless you, and we'll see you in our next exploration of these timeless truths. Stay blessed, stay courageous, and remember, no giant is too big for a God who specializes in impossible victories.